Yeah.
No, but you were true about like the code reference, like in the name. It was kind of like we also wanted to kind of like share this idea that Bitnik was in the beginning. It was just like a computer. Like Bitnik was the name of our server, and we were just like people sharing that Linux server, trying to do stuff, publish things, connect it to other networks, hooking it up to a telephone system. All those things were kind of like part of that, kind of like, and we had like 6 or 7 people who had access or were kind of like root access on this Bitnik server.
Oh,
we
wow.
got hacked a lot, and so yeah, just like kind of like forming a team was basically really coming out of this practice of sharing resources, sharing kind of like user space on a computer.
Wow, this is a good point. Sharing resources on a computer to make now the cut, because I think we are short before 7. First people show up in the chat and say hello. Darkbox.
Yeah.
Is it Dragan? I don't know who Darkbox is. No. And talking about the sharing data you said, then we could say hello to the chat. Sure. Davide. Says, hey, Davide.
Hey.
So then we say hello to the people and start with the idea to talk about, that was my idea. I was thinking that I would like to concentrate more these, like on interviews, maybe to talk about one piece. And but then, sure, we will jump as always from one to the other. And for this, there are already prepared links, like influentials. You put some links in, I put some links in, and you can find these links under the video. And yeah, I would like to talk about the opera piece, the Calling Opera event, or hack. It's called Hacking the Opera, Arias for All in the subtitle. So hacking was a real strong word in the description. I think it's also its notion. I don't know if it is always positive, but I think it has an ambivalent a notion now for you both, and I would like also to talk about this. But the opera calling was the second work, or a really early work, I think. But for me, it is combining a lot of ideas. They go through your whole oeuvre, I would say. So, and I thought I would love to use the possibility to talk about this. How it came to this. Maybe we start with this.
Sure.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Sarkowski.
Yes,
sure.
Thanks for the invitation.
Thanks that you're here. Yeah, how it came to this moment. So, I mean, before there was this other work we could talk about. It's download finished.
Yes.
But
it doesn't work anymore.
Oh.
Yeah, it's not working anymore. Konfigurationsfehler.
Okay.
But the on your website it's still working. Yeah, it's only the domain which is not working anymore. But you already have here a screenshot from the archive with a nice old Mac browser window. I think it's it looks like an Explorer, an Internet Explorer of Mac. But I don't know. It's what I think. Yeah, it is also the old times, and this was a piece which also dealt with with content and the question of sharing content and the aesthetic, how to present it, how to overwork it, and who has a right on it, and property. The intellectual property ownership was this topic already in the work, but on a humorous way, I would say. So this PDF where you had these German and English the most asked questions.
Yes.
Then it's also like how you can use it to make your own exhibition, more or less. It's also
Yes,
described
exactly.
there. And for me, it was so, yeah, but this, now we're talking about this, but why not? Yeah, it was also, I didn't know it, I have to say. So, opera calling, I heard about this. I don't remember when you had this exhibition in the Torstraße in Berlin. When was it?
Oof.
2011 maybe,
11.
something like that.
Oh, really? So late? So because
Yeah,
2010.
I
10
have to
maybe.
admit, I think I have to admit that 2010 or 11, yeah, that was the Torstraße, the exhibition. That was really the first thing where I saw it in full awareness. And yeah, but then here then there was always for me, as I looked, then you're up on the web page and saw your all works, and I was reminded on the pirate cinema. That was
Yes.
later, that got much more attraction. But the pirate cinema somehow was also related on this kind of Berlin pirate cinema, which was long before, so from
Yes.
2004. But it had not really the artist, the way as it came not as an artwork. It was more
Yes.
social invention, I think. And this is closer, but for me it's closer than to your work than this from Robert Maigret. You know what I mean? So that was for me, it's for me interesting, so that you have this kind of broad range from this kind of social activism, you could say, or hacktivism, some people say, but also from social intentions from your idea, what, as I understand it, what art should do. And then on the other side, you have this kind of coming back to the opera, you have this installation in the art business, in the gallery context, to bring it up in an aesthetic form as an artwork. So these are for me the two dimensions, or the two borders in between the tension is happening, or your art pieces is happening. And the opera piece was more or less one step further from the download.
Yeah, I think Download Finished came out of probably a number of years we spent having been inspired by the Telestreets movement to look at television, to kind of revisit television, while it was already, I'm not sure, in a way it was still the light medium in the beginning of our art practice, but it was kind of moving out. Other things were becoming important, the internet was becoming important, and but we were really fascinated by this Telestreets movement because
maybe you need to explain.
Yes, they kind of used in northern Italy, in Bologna, Milan, Rome, people used very low frequency television transmitters to broadcast content, but in a very small area. They then reached whole cities or larger areas by just placing many kind of broadcasting stations that would then send out the same contents. They also shared contents between various cities and stations, and we really like the tactical aspect of it. You know, this kind of being below the radar because you're not that visible, because your transmitter is not as strong, you don't get caught as easily, and this idea of also taking back the city in a way as a scape of broadcast kind of wavelengths, and kind of saying, well, you know, this is public space as well, and why can't we also kind of broadcast stuff within this landscape or cityscape? And there was especially one, I think, kind of moment that made it into our kind of or that impressed us a lot, and this was when in Rome they rebroadcast a local derby. Do you say that? Like a football game between the two the local rivals,
between AS Roma and Lazio,
which at the time the whole football culture in television was moving to the pay TV kind of models, and this specific game, although it was very important to people locally, was being broadcast only on Sky TV, on the Rupert Murdoch's kind of pay TV, and people couldn't afford this. So what Telestreets did was they bought one subscription to Sky TV, and then used their stations to rebroadcast the game locally all across
in the neighborhood.
And we can,
and
we can show it here.
Yeah. And I mean, the nice thing is we have a video documentation, and the nice thing is they actually go and ring people's doorbells, you know, to tell them that they can now watch the game on television and which frequency they can watch it on.
We can show it for the moment. That was your idea. That's maybe the best moment to show it now.
Yeah.
Should we run it the 6 minutes, or?
Yeah, we can also just like skip a bit
skip a little bit for.
Yeah.
So it explains kind of like that there is one card which is kind of like retransmitting the whole thing, and you see like it's already football scoring, Street TV 2, Sky 1, 0.
0. And this is kind of they show the setup in the beginning.
They show how they do it. Nice.
Yes.
It's always also a little bit proud, or so the people are always proud then about their technique and so.
Sure. And here they say like you need to join channel 71 on this UHF frequency to be able to watch it.
People can't see it. Fuck.
People can't see it.
No, one moment. Here. So. People couldn't see it. So now they see it.
Just like do it from here. It's okay. So you see the scene now where she rings people at home and asks them if they know about it. And I think this was also like very inspirational for opera calling, that, you know, the idea of kind of like broadcasting things to people's home and, you know, kind of like touch them where they are sitting. Similar kind of like to the NetArt tactics of, you know, saying, hey, the browser can reach people like in their private homes, and this has like another quality. So we were very fascinated about these ideas, basically.
Yes. And I think especially Download Finished was a direct kind of consequence of this inspiration with Telestreets, because we kind of we started building small kind of micro TV stations, but then hooking them up with the internet, and we built interfaces where people could as a group choose what they wanted to watch on the pirate TV station, which kind of meant that whoever was in range could kind of also changed the one playlist that was online, so you could actually, you know, kick out stuff people wanted to watch and put in your own. It was kind of like this question of, you know, this endless content online. Why doesn't it find its way into other media and kind of?
Yeah, there was also like a website which was called Copyfight, which basically was a shared torrent and emule, like a peer-to-peer client, where people could just like download films to our TV server and then broadcast it to the neighborhood. And so we used this interface afterwards to build Download Finished, where you could just like go to our website, to downloadfinished.com, and search for a movie, and in the peer-to-peer networks, basically on eDonkey, emule was the biggest network at that time. Pirate Bay torrents were just like coming in, I think. And yeah, you could download films to the server's hard drive. The server would kind of like cut up the films, you know, kind of like glitch them. We had this idea, we wanted to build a digital machine where, you know, like in the 70s or where you had people who would scratch like a file,
DVD or later
DVDs or
VHS
tapes or videotapes,
Super 8 film.
Yes, and kind of like, you know, produce kind of like
glitches,
new originals, and
yes,
we tried to kind of like, you know, build a digital version out of it.
So it's called Download Finished because basically the question was, you know, after you download a film and you've watched it, can you do something else with this pirated material that's laying around on your hard disk? And our take on it was, you know, you kind of automatically glitch it into a 10-minute short version of the film, and the Download Finished also provided already the titles to the film, so it was just the file name we used as the title for the work, and at the end of the film it also put in your name as an author of the film, with the idea that you could actually use Download Finished to directly produce art to then send off to a video festival, for example.
Yeah.
So we had a lot of troubles with that server, obviously, because of copyright issues and whatever, and always needed to prove that it's like art and that we should be able to do it. And there were several kind of like artist legacy foundations who wanted to sue us, for example. And after like 2 years of running it and having like 1,500 movies, I think, we kind of like stopped because it was too.
Also technology was changing all the time, and So there's a very nice archive of about 1,500 films from different people who, you know, glitched films, and
Yeah.
So it worked really, really well with dance films, which you see here as an example, because of the movement, of course. It also worked really well with old Tati movies. So there was actually this genre building then going on Download Finished, where people kind of realized, you know, looking at examples of other people, kind of realized what worked well with the machine we have built.
And what I liked, also had like a gold member access for our hardcore users. We invited them after like where they had access to all the pirate material, like to the full length movies.
Nice.
Yeah.
You know, not only like the glitch version, but also.
So then you have these kind of evolvement from this ground on, then you build this idea, or how it came that this is another scale for me, the opera.
I mean, like we try to be a bit more precise, I think, with that, maybe.
Yeah, and I think the opera, maybe this is also something to do with the local Zurich context. I think the opera for us was always a big issue within the city in a way, because so much of the cultural funding in Zurich and also of the canton of Zurich, both the city and the canton, goes into this house. It's one of the, I don't know if it's still like that today, but at the time it was one of the best funded opera houses in Europe. And this is kind of, it means that you have a lot of also opera-related culture going on in terms of, you know, people playing classical music, but also I think the Opera House in Zurich still has one of the biggest productions of costumes still, you know, and still teaches people a lot of the very, you know, the technical skills needed from olden times. And so it kind of, I think for us it was always there, maybe much more than in another city, and especially this topic of sharing culture. So the opera in Zurich is heavily subsidized, but still very expensive to get into. It wasn't something we could have easily afforded, and at the same time you have like the Migros, which is like a local cultural funder who gives away tickets for free to the people, so that people also have access. So it's this, it is a topic within the city in a way.
Yeah, and it kind of like felt, I don't know, as a bit like as the opposite of the internet at that time. Sure. You know, kind of like the question of access, you know, kind of like who has access to that kind of like built architecture, which you need to kind of like, you need to go there to experience the thing. You need to dress up, it's expensive, you can't afford it, and all those things. And we're just like, we thought, yeah, it's kind of like a good example maybe to rethink, you know, artistic methods for us. In the sense of, okay, what happens if you apply like strategies we know from hackers to these cultural fields? You know, can we kind of like copy the methods and try to open up? You know, it's kind of like build architecture, and this was basically kind of like the viewing angle, a bit like a very like a systemic view on things, you know, kind of like, okay, there's like this architecture, and how can we kind of like enter, what kind of ways do we have to bring the signal out to the people, or, you know, connect it to the internet, or, you know, also like very inspired by Heath Bunting's piece, the London Pirate radio station, where you could basically, over his website, you could listen to pirate radio stations from London, which are kind of like local culture, and you could, you know, be 1,000 kilometers away and listen to those things. And those, like, you know, those concepts, they really fascinated us, and we wanted to kind of like find our angle within our local environment.
Yeah, and I think at the time then two things came together. We kind of we had done a lot of experimenting with TV and with telephones. So we had we'd been running a kind of a telephone, a digital switching machine for several reasons. That was like one thing that kind of was already in place and kind of kind of made sense to look at within this context. And the other thing that kind of was really important was that we got an invitation from the Cabaret Voltaire in Zurich, which is an institution that was newly founded at the birthplace of Dada, about 2 years before, maybe. And they ran a program of exhibitions and events where they, like half a year, they always focused on the Dada heritage and kind of did exhibitions on, I don't know, Sophie Teuber-Arp or whoever else. And then the other half of the year, they invited people they regarded as post-Dada, and and we received an invitation to do something with them, because for us this idea, we'd already had the idea of doing something with the opera and telephones, but we wouldn't have been able to do that without institutional backing. I think we really needed, someone to kind of also support this work and support the research and the whole technological.
Yeah, maybe you can
building.
switch to the files now, Sapkowski.
Sure.
Because maybe not this one. There's just like some. So basically, we start to look into kind of like opera and phone and media use of kind of like of.
Yeah, this is the Zurich Opera House.
Yeah, maybe the next one.
I think I have. This is not so easy. One moment. So we do it like in this Vorschau. So this is the opera house, or
yes.
Is it an handy picture, or no? It's Photoshop.
I don't know. It's some sort of like, I think the Python filter wrote like to pixelize things.
Yeah. This is the next.
And yes, so we looked into the history of the telephone, and we realized that there was actually a time where the telephone was invented and the radio had not been invented yet, where the telephone was pretty much used as a dissemination system for cultural broadcasting, like a radio was later used. It was very impressive to people at the time of its invention, of course, because it was the first time you could remotely access a space without physically having to be there. So it was kind of this remote connection that was very
live feeling.
Yeah, very impressive to people. And what they did early on was use telephone in cities to rebroadcast any cultural contents they had. So if the city had an opera house, or in Paris it was called the Théâtrophone, so they rebroadcast theatre pieces. And you see on this picture, you see the family or the people listening on the left. They don't have a handheld, they're not talking one-on-one, but they actually have a type of radio or gramophone thing stuck to the wall. In the middle you have the switch, and on the right is the opera singer, and on the ground before her are
like the microphones,
which are placed there to pick up the sound.
Yeah.
And this went on in Europe in many cities. The longest standing was Budapest, and this went on until the radio was used instead of the telephone.
Yeah, so basically we took this image and asked ourselves, what happens if we kind of like restage this whole thing 110 years later? Kind of like, would have like somehow we managed to get back microphones into the opera house. Then we would have like maybe a show with the telephone network,
which is kind of the switch.
Yes, and from there we would just like call everybody in the phone book to give them access to the live opera. Yeah. And so this was basically the thing. So we went on and started to build it, kind of like trying to get the technical things up, experimented a lot with radio broadcasting, how to get the signal out. When we realized that the easiest thing to work with is mobile phones. So we just like bought mobile phones on eBay for $10, like the cheapest Nokias. And we hit like a lot of phones inside the opera house and called them, and they would pick up and give us like a live feed.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they had this auto pickup function.
Genau.
It was
yes.
It was great. Here you see
basically the bug where already kind of like we didn't ask for permission to do that. So we just like had a show opening with a very kind of like abstract text where nobody knew what it is about. It was kind of like, okay. And
we waited for the opera to start their performance.
Yes, and
with that we started ours.
And then at 7 o'clock, like Friday nights, we had like this live stream coming into the Cabaret Voltaire from the opera. And we had like this telephone machine just like randomly calling people from the phone book. And as soon as they would pick up, you would hear a voice, like in Italian, kind of like female voice, which would say, hey, the opera is bugged. Do you want to, if you want to listen to it, to this and this performance by Richard Strauss, just stay in line, you will be connected.
Yeah. And then in the exhibition, you also showed this kind of, dialing, the machine. So I would say you not only had the receiving devices like here nicely installed, but you could also see the machine. I don't know, but this is not the machine. Here it's a text like.
Yes, but the machine is on
the other
top
side.
Yeah, and the light was also, it was kind of like an over-dramatic room, as the opera is, kind of like very pompous. And
you see the machine there, that black thing.
Where? No, I can't see it.
On top, on top of the phones,
Okay.
So, I mean, the switch, I mean, the machine was actually in this room because we kind of thought that maybe we'd get in trouble, and we didn't want it to be easy to seize the telephone switch. So we thought it needs to be in a public art institution, because that kind of means there are the rules that are in place to get it out of there are a bit more demanding than if we'd had it in our basement or in our studio or whatever. And this space, the switch space, was also the only space where you could listen to the opera while it was going on if you weren't called at home.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like during the exhibition we told people to go home. Go home and wait next to your phone for the opera to call you, for opera calling to call you. And if you didn't want to do that, this was the only space where you could kind of listen to the work as it was going on. And you saw, so every time somebody picked up, the lights went on, and you could listen through the receivers hanging from the ceiling. You could listen to the people at home and the opera going on.
But as devil's advocate, so in the end, how much people could listen to it. So on the space, you have like a mirror effect, like the opera. So you can't see there are not so many people can enter, like not so much like in the opera. And how much you called?
I mean, like in the end, we had like 5,000 people.
Okay.
So we did like 5,000 home deliveries.
Yeah.
It was a very personal message. It wasn't kind of like broadcasted to everybody. It was really kind of like, okay,
there was one live stream at a time.
Yeah. We didn't have money for more telephone lines. Sure. We only had like one.
Well, I think it was also kind of the point, it was kind of like this, it became this very personal space also, very private, special, remote listen in to the opera, which we, I guess you could have or the opera could have just rebroadcast their
but it was not
events on the radio, but that wasn't what we were going for.
Yeah, it was not your intention, so it wasn't what
exactly.
the concept and the idea about talking about the properties
and
distribution.
It was much more about the narrative, kind of like okay, I mean, like you try to inject something into this field and, you know, and see where public discussion goes on what happens and how, you know, also the question of how will the law react, how will the opera react, how will the people at home react. We didn't know all those things. We're kind of like, you know, very open.
Yeah, and it was also a very personal delivery in that, of course, it was a service that nobody had asked for. So you kind of, I mean, 2007, you didn't pick up your landline and think you were going to be played music, you know, from the opera house. You picked it up because you thought somebody was calling you. So there was also all this confusion going on about, why am I listening to the opera now? Who is doing this? Why, you know, I didn't ask for this. This kind of, whereas, you know, you turn on the radio and there's music on because that's what radio does. But this is not what telephone did at that time. And I think this was also what interested us, this kind of, this misunderstanding in a way of a technical system, or of a understanding it in a way it was used before but not used anymore.
Yeah. On the other hand, it is also has its continuity from the work before, so it gets something else if it is broadcasted by a telephone. So it's for sure not the opera anymore. It's really, it becomes a new piece, more or less like the piece we talked before. That's like a rework by the medium, by the concept, by the artist praxis, and in this sense, I would say here it's also a classical praxis of more. For me, it was more always. I never really got the hack moment, so but it was an intervention, and for me, it was also more happening. So that the audience, as you said, the spectator, is part, because they become unwillingly sometimes also part of the whole of the whole presence of the art, which is emergent in this moment as they are taking the phone call. You know, otherwise nothing would happen. And yeah, interesting is that also the spectator is not really, in the sense, he has not, or she has not to interact. So
no.
It's really a passive thing. If I remember me, not long ago, I saw the old piece again from. No, I'm out. I lost the Van Gogh TV. I saw the Van Gogh TV piece again, where they were on Documenter and had this live channel where people could call in and had a video phone, and there was also a chat. So it was already multimedia and interactive, but the experience from the audience was they couldn't deal with it. So because they had to interact, and so they couldn't say more mostly than hello. Over hours you hear only hello. Hello, and nothing has happened. But in your case, they had not to do anything, so it was like TV, or it was really like this classical.
It was broadcast, yeah. At the same time, there was also like a lot of confusion of how the system works, because people thought, I mean, like after a while, there was this question about those bugs. You know, kind of like within the performance, they became like very important. That the opera house started to look for the bugs, and they tried to find them, and they said that they want to call the military to debug the opera house. Okay. And people at home, they thought like if they shout into the phone, maybe somebody in the opera will hear where the bug is. So we had a lot of kind of like
traitors.
But yes, you had a lot of people kind of like trying, you know, kind of like, oh, maybe kind of like, you know, it will show up. But the problem was that their end, kind of like their voice ended in the Cabaret Voltaire. It wasn't rebroadcasted to the
they were muted.
Yes. Yeah. So there was a lot of kind of like, nobody really understood how this thing works, and it was also like for us confusing. You know, kind of like not really knowing what is this, what kind of like broadcasting system is this, what kind of like life experience is it. But for us, kind of like producing this hole between the home and the opera, you know, and kind of like warp the space in between was interesting.
Yeah. And also for me, what was it here? One question again. What was it here on the monitors? Oh no, you can't see it because it's in the middle, in the center. Here, it's better to see.
You always see kind of like which telephone number is connected. I think this was basically an output from the server, and what
the opera that was playing.
The opera was playing, and if the connection status to the box is okay, kind of like.
It was like a monitor of the process, of the technical process.
Yes.
Yeah. And then also I saw here it was like also similar like before the piece that the intention to propagate it to others, that they should start to become active and hack also the opera. So 10 steps to hack an opera. It's like doing the file sharing, upload your video, rework it, and then send it to an exhibition as an artist. And yeah, so there are all these things coming together for me, and then yeah, it got this huge press attention. How you dealt with this in this time was for me also.
I mean, yeah. Do you want to say something? Maybe we also just need to address the chat that this is live.
Okay.
Because there's like rumors that it's not. Yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, this is Twitch. This is live. Yeah.
This was also the question of the opera in the end. Like, did all those? Live? Is this all a fake? You know, kind of like they just like play an MP3 file and all those things.
Yeah. But then you always, when it was break time was actually always a highlight, because then you could hear people clapping and talking, and you know, you had like the intermissions also.
Yes.
The proof, kind of like in a way. Yeah.
Proof of authenticity. This is really interesting because for me it's a moment where we have this double thing. I think what you talked about before about the house, you have this high entry, so it's really expensive. You need a dress code and special behavior, maybe education, maybe too, and to understand the art and so on. And all these steps make the entry often hard into the opera. But in the end, often in the art world is the same. And here we have how we can mediate this, because I think this is also in the piece. It is also a part. So give it to the public, but how should this work? And now we see it, and I think on the internet, where you think that everyone can participate and can take part on the content, they pay. But there are so many people can take part that the amount what they pay is so less. So it's so little, not so less. It's so little that in the end, the YouTube star, I don't know, who has 12 million followers or so, then he sells also his advertisements for 100,000. And so in the end, so the YouTube star is like the opera singer. But we all not pay so much. We only pay bits of this price. But is it comparable for you, or is this a strange thought? I don't know how you see this kind of media. It's always also, I think, subject in your works, that you have these different medias, as you talked about, the telephone, now the opera, then the internet, then the broadcast, and so on. Is there a comparison, or is it a strange comparison from my side? Can you know what I mean? No.
Yeah, no. I mean, I can relate to that. In that, I think for us, in our thinking, it's always a concern to try and kind of imagine or find out or understand where power is within these systems. You know, who has the power to access, to understand what type of education do you need to, you know, be accepted within a circle of something. And I think in a way maybe this also has to do that for both Doma and for me, the art world wasn't easy access, in that we both maybe don't come from households that where we were brought up with a lot of understanding or access for these spaces. So they've always had they've always held confusion also, or at least for me, there's always been stuff that's been confusing, and I think this also always kind of excited my curiosity to kind of find out how things work and how people work within these contexts. And I think the streaming, it's no different in a way. It's also community where I'm not sure I understand how things or what things go on, but it's interesting to follow and to kind of try and find out how these models work and why people are so interested in following some of these people. And I guess compared to the opera, with the internet, we all get the chance of being one of these people and having a following much more than before, where the threshold for access was just a lot higher.
Mm-hmm. But not only being, also in the first step, maybe participating and viewing and watching and experiencing these kind of things. What is the opera was always exclusive and so.
I mean, for us, it was much more, I don't know, I mean, like, we didn't have answers to this, kind of like when we did the project. We just like, it was more kind of like pointing to something where we thought like it's important to discuss those things. It's important to discuss copyright in this moment,
yes.
Transmission, all those things which are collapsing with the net, and but it's worth to experiment with it, kind of like not having like the, trying also to force the opera to rethink their position in terms of what public is, and also the other houses and the arts and everybody. And so we never kind of like provided solutions to those problems. It was more like kind of like finger pointing maybe, and trying to tell stories which are.
I think that's what art is doing, and specialty if it is performative in a way like in happening, you never really know what is the outcome. If you would know it before, then these are all machines who take part, and also then you don't know what is the outcome often. So I think it's a process. So it's typical for art. I think it's no wonder. But here in the chat, I see a little bit up before I overlooked it. I saw the question from someone who is pointing to Igor Strohmeyer's Internetica Balletica and Internetica and. You remember, and you were aware of this project, that he entered also the Bolshoi Theater with the robots and the Volksbühne in Berlin and other operas, and broadcasted this? You were aware of this?
I mean, like, we were for sure aware of Igor's work, but I don't think we really understood what was happening at that time. Yeah. We later, through Maria, I think, like a Greek curator who worked together with him, we got it explained. But it was basically a bit after our project, I think.
No, I think the opera was before, long before.
Which one? Ours or his ones?
His ones.
No. Yeah, but we weren't aware of it.
We weren't aware.
Kind of what the project really is.
No.
Yeah.
But I think it deals also with some similar questions. So I think it's really interesting that in this moment that art was trying to to find an expression for that. Was the time also there was this huge discourse, much more than nowadays, about intellectual property and access and threshold, and so it's not really the discourse anymore. Somehow it's more now about control and who has power and who owns the structures, in a sense, which leads me a little bit to the next project also. What I had in mind, what was somehow, if the audience is, that was a little bit what I was intended to say before, with a comparison to the YouTube star or something, with the opera singer, that what has happened now in the net, that it seems that the net is there for an audience which is mostly, which are mostly bots. So it seems that the net is talking with itself, and then we as humans seem only, like attached, really on the outskirts of the net. And sure, you explored the outskirts also with a darknet shopper, but I think for me interesting was because in the same time I was also thinking about this question. Is a net, from my own experience, is a net only for bots? So, and you made this bot work. It's also, it's for me. It's also in the context. It's I don't know how you see it. I shouldn't say how I think about it. You see it in the context. Or can you see it in the context of this opera thing, or is it totally a new level, a new, a new part of your oeuvre?
Well,
no, I think we're always interested in the notion of kind of like, or the question of who performs when. And can software perform, for example? Can like a machine perform? Can a bot perform? What kind of like body is really there who does things? And so I was always attracted to those questions, kind of like, because I also, as an artist, I was kind of like, for me, it was the moment I liked most was kind of like sitting behind the computer doing things and not having my body performing, kind of like, so it was kind of like very related to kind of like this bot work.
That was a nerd. This is a nerd moment, No, for me, it's really like you said before. So simple to say it again. As the people with the telephones in the Cabaret Voltaire, they ask themselves, maybe it is a fake, maybe it's only an MP3. This moment. I mean, the audience and the spectator and the internet now that you. As you said also in the beginning, as before 7, that you said you never know in the internet because the medium it's hard to prove who is who, and
sure.
And so this kind of moment is that there are happening things, but you can't know it anymore who is behind or who is it. Is it really an opera singer, or is it really a performer? Is it an artist or so? And this is also the case. I saw this was for me the connection. So a little bit so that the people they talk with bots, or the bots try to start the discourse, and the dialogue, they called them, if I understand it right.
Yes.
And then and then the others, they accepted in a way, I think also, that they are bots. You know? So I think there is this ambivalence. So they knew this is a machine and they are played, but also that was also a performative moment for them. So where they could participate and dream and have their events.
Yeah, in a way, I think there was a shift between the time of opera calling and the time of this work is called Ashley Madison, Angels at Work. In that I think the possibility of bots was there in 2007, but never as widespread as then in 2015, 16, when we did this work. And I think this question of authenticity also shifted a lot. With opera calling, we were asked a lot, can you prove that you're really doing this? And to us as artists, it seemed kind of a bit pointless, because for us, it wasn't about being authentic. In a way, it was like a very strange question to us. Whereas here, I think for many people, not only the users, but also us who kind of came across Ashley Madison after it was hacked. And with the hack, the whole structure and the whole functions of this website were laid bare. So just to quickly explain for maybe people who don't know this, Ashley Madison was a dating service aimed specifically at people who were married or in committed relationships. Their slogan was, life is short, have an affair. And they heavily entered the market and tried to, up their market share in the kind of the online dating game, with, very specific slogans. And the interesting thing was that they weren't able to attract enough women to their dating site. And so they basically replaced the women with bots. And these bots were very crude beings. They were not intelligent. They didn't learn. They were just equipped with a few sentences. They could say kind of pickup lines where they could, which they could throw at people. But at the time, it was kind of enough. It was that moment in time when people maybe didn't have enough experience with bots to immediately know these were bots. Of course, there were people who realized immediately, but many people didn't. And as Ashley Madison kind of put it when they were found out, they also kind of said, well, it's not the point, if you're having a good time, what do you care whether you're talking to a bot or not? Of course, it kind of, you couldn't actually meet up this bot. So this, for many people, it stayed, as you described it, it was about maybe this fantasy of, meeting somebody online and kind of chatting. But I think what impressed us very much with Ashley Madison was how they very cleverly used all the elements that were there of their dating system. So this, non-live chatting function where you where they used to their advantage that, they would wait for people to log out of Ashley Madison and then have the bots chat at them to get them back to log back in. This kind of, not synchronized chatting. So it was very slow, kind of lets you get away with a lot. And this was very interesting to us as artists, this system they have built.
What kind of narratives do you need to build around those things that you can kind of hide very bad technology, very crude algorithms which are there. But at the same time, it was very clever built in a way that, you had the feeling that you are on a social platform, but you were totally isolated as a user. You had nobody to speak to. You were kind of looking for an affair. There was nobody to have an affair with. And even though if you experienced that you were chatting to bots, it was kind of a very shitty story to tell to anybody. You couldn't go to your wife and say, "Hey, I tried to cheat you, and I think they fooled me into kind of spending a lot of money." So for us, it was kind of more this kind of theatrical. It was almost like a theatrical piece, and yeah, where we kind of like try to learn from it, for future projects.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, it was a time also where I was thinking about this and had this experience with the web.work. I told you that I will shamelessly plug this here because it was for me the interesting moment where my work was this web.pilgrimage. It's also linked there, where I logged in and streamed the process of logging in different platforms. And then I got followers from friends, for sure, I know them, but then I got also a lot of followers because I did nothing, I have to say, and you can watch the videos. I only open up the accounts, and then I got also a lot of followers. They tried to hold me or talk to me on the platform, but then in the end they were bots. Yeah, this is an account what I did then on Pinterest and what I used then in the pilgrimage in the web.work. And then it developed there further. Here we have then these kind of profile pics, what you can use if you do these fake bots. And I'm sometimes, I'm really, if I'm looking superficial and very fast, then I can't say is it real or not. So it's same for me. Yeah. And I think that led me then also to our project we did together, the Alexiety. Because then that was also more or less a little bit later than the Ashley piece, a year later, I think. But it was also talking about bots in a very performative way. I don't know. I think we are. Yeah. Now it's we are now an hour, so I think we could. I don't know if you would like to talk about this here, or if we make a cut and open it up to the chat. So they still are there, which is really nice. And what do you think? Would you like to say something to Alexiety, or we open it up to the chat?
Yeah, I think we can open it up to the chat.
Okay. Cool. And people have the links in the later under the video, now on the website, on Twitch, and then they can read the explanation about. So, are there questions? No?
Can we hear something about Alexa?
Okay. Alexiety. Now then.
Those talking heads. Yeah, Vuk is right. Hi, Vuk.
Yeah. Those talking heads are now.
I think Igor is also posting links. Cool.
Yeah. We can maybe say something very quickly about Alexiety. It was kind of the same idea again of entering people's home with the art piece. But this time because we kind of wanted to talk about and to these all these home smart devices, these smart home devices that were coming up at the time. So Amazon Echo and Google Home and Siri and Cortana, and talk to these devices. And because they live in people's private spaces, we kind of also wanted to enter that. And the Alexiety piece is a collaboration with a musician from Paris, a Paris-based musician whose name is Lojack. And we collaborated with him on 3 music pieces, where the point is kind of that you listen to a song, but which kind of talks about this relationship you can have with these smart devices, while at the same time addressing the smart devices. So if there's a smart device in the room with you while you listen to the songs, the smart device will react to the song and answer back. And, there's like sentences like, delete my calendar address to Alexa, and she goes and does that. Or she buys, she signs up to Amazon Music Unlimited and
buys opera tickets.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
also I have to say from my perspective, then this Alexiety here in this version, what we showed in Punker, that was a special evolvement of the first iteration, and it was becoming also big. Through the exhibition situation, because it was a duo exhibition with OMS Social Club, so where we thought, okay, how we can exhibit a LARP and so do a real duo show. So we came up then with the idea to have an edition, like Punke is doing these kind of editions. This was our second edition. And we said, okay, there will be a presentation where LoJack is playing live then, and this will part of the OMSC piece, which will be then a LARP, and so it came all together, and then it came to the situation that we did then this crypto rave. Yeah, where the crypto rave, more or less the first topic or the first sujet or the first idea was to release a Alexiety record, and that is a release party, so more or less. And in this sense, yeah, I was then yeah, I was very happy about this, how this came together then with your work. Yeah, and yeah, this is a picture in the background. You can see then the edition you could buy, and then the installation from also from the miner. Yeah, so that was from my side, code edition. And yeah, if there are no more questions. Glowjack? No, LoJack. Okay. You would like to add? We have some really more pictures from more files we haven't talked about, but maybe it wasn't necessary. I have to. I can go through the. No. One moment. It's really hard for me. This was the answer.
Yes, this was the bug, basically.
Yeah, we can go fast through them.
Yes.
This maybe were on the screens, no?
No, this is part of a video work now, where we show like
I see.
Like telephone calls, which we kind of like recorded of the people's home, and it's basically one of those calls of Opera calling of this like 5,000, where a family receives a phone call and they basically explain the whole project to themselves, which is kind of like to each other, which is kind of like nice, which was kind of like nice for us to find, because it solves like this problem of how do you document, you know, kind of like this live performances, live things. And it's a family, it's Sunday afternoon, and yeah, and kind of like they all group together in front of this phone.
But you see, my relation to the opera piece was not so far. You put it by yourself in the exhibition of the Ashington medley.
Yes.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah. Yeah, we have then here press Spiegel, the opera calling. Also, this is now a movie. This was
this was the file.
Yeah, this is a file. But this is also on the website, or you can download it. Yes. And the Spielplan. Yeah, these were the files. And yeah, I think this was it, or? Then I would say...
Yeah. Yes, thanks everybody for showing up.
Yes.
It was nice
Thank you.
to kind of like feel you also.
Yeah. Thank you, and then see you next time.
Yeah.
I would say.
Okay.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
I stop the stream.